Alrighty, hey there. So this is going to be a bit of a weird video. This is unscripted, and this is also not like anything I make on my channel. This is a tier list for Dead by Daylight killers. I'm currently working on a video where I talk about Ken Kaneki, the new killer in the Tokyo Ghoul chapter that just entered the PTB. And I realized for part of the video I need a tier list because I was going to show off my tier list. So I have my old one on a second screen with some notes about all of the new changes that we have to certain killers, as well as just some of the changes in the game that have happened since the last time I made this tier list. So I'm going to be looking at my old tier list, looking at some of the changes, and then we'll get into who I place where and why. I'm not going to do it in order of killer. I'm actually going to do it from bottom to top, and we will go from there. So at the very bottom of the list, I have Skull Merchant. Oh, sorry, down here. My biggest problem with Skull Merchant is, first of all, she is a killer with no looping potential with her power. Sure, you might be able to land a injure on a survivor somewhat mid-chase with her power, but for the most part, her power has no looping potential. She's also super difficult to play in the sense of a lot of lower level survivors just will not play against her. I've had endless matches of even some higher, MMR survivors that will just DC the second they see her, or if I get a down at any speed, really, they immediately leave. So I'd love to actually more properly grade her power, but it's just hard to play her right now. People don't want to play against the Skull Merchant. Also, from what I can tell, it is now super easy to hack her drones, and she just doesn't have a whole lot of potential for actually like covering areas with them as much as she used to before all of her nerfs, which is perfectly understandable. Right above the Skull Merchant, I'm going to place Pig. I don't think Pig is that bad of a killer on paper. I think Pig has a lot of potential, but Ambush is just very hard to get off. The traps are pretty easy to get off if you don't heavily patrol them. And for the most part, everyone knows how to play against a Pig. It's obvious the Pig is trying to waste your time. Maybe I might move Pig up a little on this list, but for right now, I want to keep Pig down here because as much as I love Pig, I love Trapper a lot too, and I'd put Trapper right above Pig. And it's just so hard with a lot of the other killers to put these ones any higher. Trapper is super nice, super easy to play. However, getting results with him is very, very difficult. You have to be a very, very skilled looping killer if you don't have any traps on your loop. And even if you do, the survivor might know there's traps there. And there's even some loops where traps are basically pointless to place in loop. Usually, when I get good results as Trapper, I'm running Tension Spring and Honing Stone, which is a very mean combo where survivors are unable to untrap themselves without downing, and if they do, it automatically resets their trap. And anytime a trap is reset by a survivor, it automatically fully resets back to the armed position. That build, I have to still place my traps in very odd places. Places I know survivors will go, but not places they're expecting traps. A trapper is most dangerous on basement because he can lock down Killer Shack entirely, making it damn near impossible to get an unhook in basement. All that potential, but it's a lot of work. Similar to Pig. Pig has a lot of potential too. You actually can get reliable kills with the bear traps, but you have to be very, very on top of harassing your boxes. And if survivors never complete a gen, it can be very, very difficult to actually get any results with the traps. Not impossible, but these two killers do require a lot of attentiveness and skill to make them work. And right above both of them, we're actually going to place Sadako, the Onryō, the Onion, if you will. Her problem actually comes more from an actually weak power, in my opinion. I think her manifest and demanifestation is a little weak. It kind of feels more like just a worse Wraith, you know? It's not entirely bad. You could definitely mind game with it a bit differently than Wraith, and even Spear, who also has a similar blinking effect, just because Sadako has a bit more control over her visibility. Just because whenever you demanifest, or whenever you remanifest, sorry, you have that blinking effect of coming in and out. You can actually pull off some pretty good mind games with that. The tapes and Condemned, as well as the TVs, they're very weak. Her teleportation is slow, it's clunky, you have to be demanifested for it, and the Condemned just isn't enough pressure. Sure, the Condemned is enough to get survivors to move tapes around, but at the end of the day, all it's going to end up doing is turning off more TVs for you, making teleporting harder. I find using Sadako to be very, very difficult, even when I'm trying my absolute hardest running the sweatiest builds. I struggle to get results with her, and I think I've only ever gotten a condemned kill like 3 times. It's a very, very difficult power to use, and I hope one day she gets a relatively decent buff to make her more viable. A little higher than her. This is actually kind of a recent change for me. Where are you, buddy? There he is. Freddy. Freddy's gotten a little better. I might even move him a little higher in D tier by the end of this video, but I used to put him all the way at the bottom, below Skull Merchant, unusable. His power sucked. I thought the pallets were better, but I didn't want to waste an add-on just for pallets. Like, Dream pallets were so much better back in the day, but they are so much better now. For those of you who have not seen the new Freddy changes, I highly recommend checking out the Otstarva video on it. I'll probably link it in the description because he does a great job showcasing all the changes. For those of you who don't know, his Dream Snares are now no longer stationary. They are launched forward in a straight line. I believe they move through walls. And if they hit a survivor who is awake, it'll progress their sleep. And if they are asleep, they will scream and it will hinder their movement. I forget by how much, but it's enough to matter in a chase. As well as the Dream Snare changes, Dream Pallets are base kit, and he can change between both of them freely. When a Dream Pallet is down, it works just as it used to. It can stun the Nightmare, but it cannot, it won't stay. Once it is dropped, it immediately breaks, whether or not it stuns the Nightmare. Obviously, this can be super nice in any chase, where if they don't know it's a Dream Pallet, they will drop it thinking it's real, and you get a free hit out of it. Dream Pallets obviously only work on survivors who are asleep. And most importantly, the Nightmare can rupture Dream Pallets. What he can do is he can hold down his power on the pallet and it will blow up. I think this does put awake survivors to sleep, or at least progress their sleep. And for survivors who are already asleep, this injures them. I don't know if it could down. I haven't tested it that far. Since these changes, I've moved him up to D tier. I might move him higher in D tier. But I still think most of my C tier killers are better than him. I moved Demogorgon down a little from the last time I used him. Even though he did get a little bit of changes here and there with his power, I still think Demogorgon is just a little too hard to use. His teleportation requires you to move around the map and set them up, which wouldn't be a problem, but the fact that his teleports can be sealed just makes covering the map very difficult. Typically, when a killer can teleport like this, especially with such freedom of teleportation, they're really good at covering the whole map. Demogorgon, because they can be sealed, just can't. He can't be everywhere at once because he has to set them up and keep them up, which, sure, you can hide them, but the further away you have to put these from gens and from unhooks, it just makes it more difficult to actually use the power regularly. Shred is good. It's a little clunky, and I wish it was a bit faster to charge, but it's not the worst. I definitely put it below a lot of the other, horizontal damage effects we have, like Nemesis Whip and Punishment of the Damned from Pyramid Head. It's not the worst. It's nowhere near the best, in my opinion, and I think he could definitely do with a little bit of speed increase on some of his stuff. Maybe Shred Charge a little faster. Personally, I think you could make his teleports unsealable to get rid of the whole seal mechanic, and you'd probably make this killer a lot better. Above Demogorgon, I have Bubba. I don't think Bubba is too bad. I just think too many people know what to do against him these days. If you get in a locker, he cannot use his power, and if you time it right, he can't grab you out either. It's just a very hard killer to get good results with these days. I still have a lot of matches where I do good with him, but that's purely because people fuck around with Bubba. They just get themselves killed. Altruism is very, very heavily demerited when you play against him. It's basically not worth going for your teammates if he's anywhere near a hook. And that just leads to, in my opinion, a very unhealthy game plan. I will say, I'm also kind of rating these killers and how fun they are to play. Honestly, if I wasn't rating fun, I would have put Onion at the bottom. Sadako is just very, very bad to play, but I have a lot of fun playing her, so I put her a bit higher in E tier. Bubba is pretty fun to play. However, it's hard to not feel cheesy playing him. Insta-downs aren't fun for survivors, and he in particular is capable, theoretically, of downing the whole team in a single power usage. I think the most I've ever gotten is 3, but it is possible to win a game in a single power usage. Hell, even more theoretically, if you have 4 very greedy survivors on the first gen, you could win the whole game before a gen is done. But again, theoretical, people know what they're doing against a Bubba, and just because of the chainsaw noise with Hillbillies as well, the second someone hears a chainsaw, they're not going to be in your range. They're going to try their best to be as far away as possible, which is completely fair. However, it is viable in chase. unlike some other powers like Ambush, so it is a bit higher than Pig, and I keep him in D tier just because of that insta-down as well. Let's see, I think I have Clown next. Yes, I do. I still agree with this. I think Clown is an okay killer. I think he's perfectly fine. And also, I want to say, I don't think any of these killers are truly bad. That's why there's no F tier. I don't think there's a killer you shouldn't play. Obviously, Skull Merchant's the closest I get to that. But above here, above E tier is going to be okay killers. Killers you can get results with if you know what you're doing. And Clown is one of them. He's a very good killer in my opinion. But his power just lacks a little bit of kill potential. He's very good at winning chases. However, a really good survivor, survivors who pre-run and pre-drop pallets can set up scenarios that are very hard for you to win even with his bottles. There are certain loops that survivors essentially can't win against him, which is very nice, but a good survivor will never walk towards any of those tiles. Which is just unfortunate that, like, it's kind of back and forth on whether or not a survivor can easily win against you or you can easily win against them. Some other killers have this problem, but for Clown it's very noticeable. Also, a lot of people do not use his yellow bottles right. Even I fall victim to this, where usually I only use his yellow bottles if I need to move around the map, or I'll throw one at my feet before I pick up a survivor. There are other situations where you can use them. Hell, you can even throw them at survivors to fuck with them and trick them up. It's very interesting. He also does have that one very funny meme add-on. I think it's a VHS porn, which swaps the colors of the bottles, which could sometimes get you a very quick first down. Above Clown, I have... Really? Wow. This might change. I have Doctor above Clown originally. I might move him... Actually, yeah, we're going to move him into C tier. We'll talk about him when we get there. So, above Clown, I have Michael, then. Where are you, Michael? There you are. I think Michael is a pretty good killer. I think he used to be a lot stronger, but the more we've seen, you know, Infinite Tombstone, Infinite Tier 3, you know, the more we see people running these cheesy gimmicks with killers, the easier they are to play against. And I think a lot of people have also just kind of learned how to play against Michael in general, cutting off line of sight as frequently as possible. If you don't hear Terror Radius, you're always looking out for him. He's a super, super fun killer to play. Nothing is more satisfying than 99 in your Tier 3 and getting like 3 downs from it. The only problem is that survivors are so good at getting, like, cucking you of your Tier 3 that sometimes even if you're trying to run like Infinite Tier 3 without Tombstone, just regular Infinite Tier 3, you might not even pull it off. I've had matches where I'm running Tombstone with Infinite Tier 3 or Tombstone Piece Infinite Tier 3 and I just never get to use it because survivors are that good at cutting off line of sight. Super fun killer. I wish there was a more healthier counterplay to him. Legion. I place Legion right above Michael. This might change in the near future just because of all the Legion buffs we're getting. Mending did get nerfed. Mending is quicker for survivors. It's 2 seconds faster, both solo and with teammates. So there is a bit of that issue of, yes, Legion did get the ability to down survivors now, and he is getting a good amount of buffs in the new patch, but I haven't seen it enough to know if he's going to be super viable. Right now, it's kind of impossible to get into killer matches on the PTB. It takes 20 minutes to queue into a game for me right now. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to play Kaneki. I'm not going to be playing Legion. So maybe this will go up. For his base power, very good injure potential. In fact, I think a really good Legion could probably play some like way higher, like maybe even B or A tier. Purely because Legion gets around fast, he gets a lot of injures, and if you are really, really good as an M1 killer in loops, he is a menace, dude. Wastes time like crazy, super oppressive, and if you're good enough in your loops, those kinds of teams that just don't heal against Legion because it doesn't let him use his power, then you have a bunch of one-shot survivors. I'd say in the right scenario, Legion is about as good as an insta-down killer, but in general, most teams know how to play against him pretty well. A lot of people are good at looping against him. And until I see how effective the buffs are, I think he still has a good place down here next to like Michael and Clown. As well as Wraith, who I put directly above him. Now, my opinion of Wraith is very high. I'm currently getting my Prestige 100 on Wraith right now for killers. My first Prestige 100 I'm going for. And I think Wraith is a very, very strong killer. There are a lot of perks that work very well with him. However, he is just an M1 killer. If you are not competent in loop and you don't know how to use his extended lunge when coming out of his cloak, he is a very, very bad killer in those situations where you aren't using those, where you aren't like looping right with him. I find myself falling victim to that all the time where I'm in a loop and I'm just stuck circling an LT wall for a minute because I just can't catch the survivor and my power just isn't giving me the distance I need. Happens all the time, and because of that, I don't place it too highly. you have to be very, very good with him to make him very, very good. Which, speaking of which, we have a killer who I think you don't need to be too good with. Chucky. I see a lot of people put Chucky way lower on tier lists, which I get. His footfalls are a very bad part of his power, in my opinion. Of course, without them, he'd be incredibly overpowered. I run stealth builds with Chucky. I run friends till the end with Furtive Chase and, friends to the end, Furtive Chase. I usually run like Pop for Gen Regression, and then I'll be running something like Unforeseen to get more undetectable status. Very, very overpowered to be undetectable with Chucky. He's a pretty strong killer. In my opinion, I think he's really strong. However, he does get beaten out by a lot of other killers in strength. I think he's kind of that threshold of when a killer becomes really good. Doctor, I will probably leave Doctor at C tier, or at the bottom of it. He's very good. I think Doctor is good. However, I think so many parts of his power are useless. A lot of his add-on stuff is cool. It's fun. Like, if you're playing with new friends and if you're like showing your friends Dead by Daylight and you want to show them how terrifying this game can be, run a custom with 4 people who don't know the game and play Doctor, with Calm and whatever add-on. I think Calm and Iridescent King is it. I think that's the setup I use. The Doctor hallucinations are pointless. The best they do is occasionally show you where some survivors are. The red light stain and the terror radius are cool, but a really good survivor doesn't fucking care for those. They'll just be watching you anyway. And I don't know how useful it is to actually have those against good 4 stacks. In the low tiers, he is a very good killer. He throws survivors off all the time. Madness is a really good way to waste time. And with the right build, you can set up very, very hard skill checks. You can get static blasts that hit half the map. My personal favorite thing to do is to run Monitor and Abuse with Calm, Static Blast, with Merciless Storm, Distressing, and I think it's Overwhelming Presence, the Trapper perk that causes more skill checks. It makes the game very hard to play. However, Doctor has that other downside of, that is a very fun way of playing him, that's also a very unfun way to play against him. I think Doctor might suffer the most from being one of the most least liked killers to play against, which is just unfortunate because I think he's very cool and very fun on paper. Above Doctor, I'm going to have Plague. Now, I know a lot of people think Plague is super high tier. Personally, I don't think she is. Her power is very unique, being, the vomit projectile. Cleansing against the vomit is not difficult. It wastes a little time, and sure, it does give her injure power. But honestly, that's what really does it under for me. I think base Plague is just not good. Her power, her strength purely comes from getting her corrupted fountains. And sure, she has that similar thing of Legion, where if you just don't heal against her, she only gains an advantage on you. But I just don't know if I'd consider it that strong. It's very easy to counterplay her on a lot of maps. Most indoor maps, she's very, very difficult to use. But there are some outdoor maps, like Coldwood Farms, most of the McMillan Estates, where it's pretty easy to get her power off and get a good amount of injures with the, I think it's not the Vile Purge, the Corrupted Purge, whatever it's called. I forget which one's which. I barely play Pig these days. I think she's good. I don't consider her as good as a lot of other people do. I will say, I definitely misplaced this here. I put Dredge above Plague. I'm going to put Dredge below Plague. Definitely not better than Plague, but Dredge, I love Dredge. When he came out, I wanted him to be my main. I said, Dredge is so cool, Nightfall is such a fun mechanic, and nothing is cooler than terrifying the shit out of a survivor who's trying to hide in a locker. The only problem is, Dredge, for me, was a very strong killer for about 3 days. Once people realized that they just need to lock us, just lock all the lockers. If there are 2 lockers next to each other, lock just one of the lockers. Never hide in a locker. Be very careful when you lock your lockers. Make sure he's not chasing you when you do. It became super hard to use his power effectively. You need to really lock down an area. Make sure your locks are broken on all your lockers that you need to use. And, really set up a good 3-gen to make Dredge really work. I know there are some people who can be very, very oppressive with Dredge. But for me, he's super fun to play, but honestly kind of infuriating to play at times too. Because sometimes you'll have survivors who all spawn separate from each other. They lock every locker on the map basically instantly. And it just sets you up for a really, really, really slow early game. You basically have to run something like Lethal or Corrupt Intervention on this guy. I love him to death, but I really wish he was just a little better. Locking the lockers is just a very annoying process to deal with, because for survivors it takes no time at all, but it can cost you every chase in the match if you're trying to like cut someone off. Above both of them, I have Deathslinger. I think Deathslinger is the perfect example of just a really well balanced killer that requires a lot of skill. Uh, if you don't know his power, he shoots a harpoon gun, like a chain gun that shoots a little like harpoon that you reel survivors in with after you hit them. The chain breaks after some time if it is being interrupted by an object. The survivor has a little bit of wiggle room whenever they're being reeled in. It is a very, very fair mechanic, and I think he marks kind of the center point of all killers. Of like, this is where you should be balancing your killers for a fun experience, but also requires a good amount of skill to use. Now, I don't think all killers should be balanced at that same level. I think it's important to have strong and even weak killers. Skull Merchant is a permanent reminder of what an overpowered killer looks like, and I think Freddy is a really good example of a kind of killer that needs buffed. And it's good to have them so that, you know, behavior and the players can see what unbalance looks like. I've never had a bad match against the Deathslinger. If the Deathslinger is really good, it's hard to disrespect it, you know. If he shoots you through a hole you didn't even know existed, damn, he knows that map better than you. He is just better. And at the same time, if he does bad, it's like, yeah, you know what? Keep going, man. You know, once you get good Deathslinger, you'll start winning every match. The Knight. Very similar with the Knight. I think the Knight is pretty well balanced, especially after the change that allows you to choose which guard you are using. Personally, I think they should change the menu to be similar to Vecna, where you have like a selection menu as opposed to still cycling through them. I'm not gonna lie, I really did like the old system. I wish they buffed the guards themselves as opposed to changing the system, but the new one is also not bad. Each guard having its own purpose is nice. He's basically an instant-down killer in certain scenarios. And the guards also, I think there's an add-on that has the guards prevent survivors from leaving the exit gates, which is super nice. There's just a lot of versatility in his build. He's very capable of doing a lot of things you wouldn't expect him to do. Like, he essentially can ignore pallets. If he's fast enough with Carnifex on a dropped pallet, the pallet does not exist for him. And he can get a lot of free hits that way. Plus, not to mention, like I said, the instant down potential with the double hits are crazy. Easiest way to deal with him, in my opinion, is if you see him trying to cut you off with a guard, take a hit from the Knight first. He only gets the insta down if the guard hits you first, because the guard can't hit you if Knight hits you first. If Knight hits you, the guard immediately ends its chase and will not hit you. The patrols are a little weak in my opinion. I'd say I very rarely find a survivor with Knight's power. It's cool when it happens. Kind of similar to Artist. Like, it's nice whenever you hit someone you didn't expect. Like, you like, oh, let me check if they're there real quick, and they are there. It's nice. But people are very good about dodging the guards while also staying hidden. I don't think he needs buffed. I think he's in a very healthy place right now, and I have no complaints. Very similar to Deathslinger, we have Huntress. I think Huntress is just like Knight and Deathslinger in that perfect area of these killers are super, super balanced and very fun and easy to play against at times, but if they're very, very good, you have to really, you know, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and try hard against them. Huntress is a little better than Deathslinger and Knight, in my opinion, because I think she has more reliable lethality. If you are a good Huntress and you're hitting every hatchet, you're going to be downing survivors like crazy. However, obviously you don't land every hatchet. There's no one that good, or at least eventually you'll come across a team where they're good enough to dodge. So it still has that level of cat and mouse a little, where you're still going to be hunting down survivors with her. It's not so overpowered that you're just like constantly downing them, chasing them, downing them, chasing them. The reload mechanic I've never had a problem with. I think Huntress, yeah, just balanced well overall. I have no complaints. Oh, I forgot to mention here, for the Ghoul, for Kaneki, I would place him between Deathslinger and Knight. Good power, good damage and lethality. The more I've used it, the more I think it's stronger, but it's hard to tell because I've mostly had to play against bots. It's just so hard to queue in PTB right now. But I will place Kaneki in between Knight and Deathslinger for now, where I think he's pretty well balanced, maybe a little hard to use, and I think a good Kaneki will be a little hard to play against, but it's just hard to, you know, scale it right now. I might change his position later. Alright, above Huntress, I have Ghostface. This is a bit of a controversial pick. I put him pretty high on the list. I put him a lot higher than most people would on a tier list. I think Ghostface has a lot of potential. A really, really good Ghostface that goes undetected is going to land downs like crazy. Just like Huntress, it's kind of hard to guarantee every single use of his power is valuable. But if it is, wow, is it oppressive. I'd say it's kind of their Trickster, where if actually no, it is their Trickster, where like if Trickster doesn't miss a knife, or if Ghostface never misses like a good stalking chance, it's gonna be a very quick match. Everyone's going down like crazy. You're gonna see people getting hooked basically every chase against a really good Ghostface. My really good friend Johnny mains Ghostface. He's a P100, and he absolutely tears up most games he's in. It is a very, very cool sight to see. And he plays on console too. Like he tears up as a console Ghostface. Which, to be fair, I'd say Ghostface is also one of the easier killers to play on console, but that's good for console players. Hey, if you want a good killer that you have to get pretty skillful with to use, this is a very good starting place. Because not only do you have to worry about using your power, but if your power doesn't work, you have to be a good M1 killer. You have to be very, very good at, mind games, moonwalking, using crouch walking to your advantage. When I started playing the game, I played on console, I mained Ghostface, and I used him as a learning tool to get used to chase. Above Ghostface, I have Pinhead. I'm a little indifferent. I think Pinhead is kind of up in that same pool as Huntress and Deathslinger as a kind of ranged killer where he's just really well balanced. I think the box is a good amount of pressure that is very easily countered, obviously, but still gives Pinhead a good way of playing around it. There are some killers who have strong counters that are just kind of impossible to play around if you're the killer. Just like, for example, Xenomorph doesn't have a good answer to a very solid flamethrower placement, and flamethrowers are very, very strong for survivors against Xenomorph. For Pinhead, if the survivor goes against the box, cool, you now know the location of a survivor whenever they solve it, and you still have your possession chain to use as a main power, and it could be really good in chase to get quick hits, quick downs, play around pallets with it. He's got a very, very solid ability. Honestly, I probably should place him a bit higher, but people just seem to be really good at playing against Pinhead, and more importantly, the chain is very hard to use. You have to put a lot of hours into Pinhead to be good with him. Speaking of Xenomorph, I place him right above Pinhead. Although the flamethrowers are very strong against Xenomorph, I find the tail to just be a lot stronger than the chain. You don't have to bind the survivor and then hit them. There's no chance of a survivor getting away from your tail. If it hits them, they just take the injure. The tail is rather hard to use. It's comparable to Nemesis Whip, but Nemesis Whip has a bit more reliability to it, in my opinion, just because it has a much larger hitbox. The tail is more versatile, but a lot harder to hit. Teleporting, quote-unquote teleporting, using the tunnels to get around the map is super strong. It is a prime example of why Demogorgon is a bad killer. This is what good teleports would look like for Demogorgon. Arguably, you could even give this exact power to Demogorgon, and it would showcase really well how good the power would be. Which is kind of funny, because if you think about it, Demogorgon and Xenomorph are very, very similar killers, except instead of getting rid of Xenomorph's teleports or tunnels, you just place flamethrowers around, while poor Demogorgon gets sealed portals that just restrict his power too much. Above Xenomorph, I have Wesker. I know a lot of people consider Wesker to be a super, super strong killer. You'll notice for tiers above C, I put a lot less killers, so he's still relatively high tier for me. I just think his power is very, very hard to get used to, very hard to learn. He is a very easy killer to counter, in my opinion. There's endless clips of Wesker's accidentally trying to grab a survivor and hitting a vault instead, hitting a pallet and vaulting over it. He has just got a super high skill ceiling and a very tall learning curve. I think he is strong, but I'm also rating this partly on how hard it is to play the killer, and I think he's a little hard to get results with. In the same vein, and also in Resident Evil, we have Nemesis. I think Nemesis is a very, very good killer on paper, but part of his power gets hindered by the fact that the zombies suck a lot. The zombies can be very good, especially on indoor maps where you can really force a survivor to get hit. I've had plenty of, Night-esque insta-downs with zombies where an infected survivor gets hit out of healthy and I just down them instantly from the injure. I like the Whip's tier system. I like the idea that Nemesis becomes more of a threat the longer he's in the trial. That's something you actually don't see with a lot of killers, where I think something that adds to Nemesis' aesthetic as a horror character in this game is the fact he gets more threatening the longer he's there. His add-ons are super good. I haven't talked a ton about add-ons yet. We'll talk about them more as we get higher up here. But Nemesis has some solid add-ons. Most of them are mainstays. You can make tons of build around them. Personally, my favorites are to run Licker's Tongue with Marvin's Blood for quick infects on survivors and extra hindered from contamination. But I also really do love running like a Serotonin Injector with Tyrant Growth for really quick zombie infection rate and some free undetectable status, meaning I can drop something like Unforeseen or Furtive Chase. Right now, the meta for Killer is like 8 perks, basically. So it's nice to have some add-ons that can replace some of the more oddball perks that I typically run. And he's very fun to play. I'd say if you're looking for a good all-round killer who's pretty well balanced and just fun to play, Nemesis is probably the best pick, if I had to give you any. B tier, this is where we're getting to killers that I think are particularly strong, just in their own right. I have Hag at the bottom of B tier. Hag is, in my opinion, one of, if not the strongest killer without any perks. I don't think Hag really needs anything to kill you. The perks are just helping her slow down the game or get to you quicker. I feel very similar about Dracula, but we'll see where he places in a minute. Hag, unfortunately, has gotten worse over time. With the change of her traps being able to be removed without flashlights, we've seen her get a little worse. A lot of people know how to play against her now. And just in general, although she is still very strong, it's just a lot easier to play against her, a lot harder to play her, and new perks have made other killers particularly stronger. She does benefit from certain perks like Friends very well. I'd say she also benefits a lot from Make Your Choice very well, which is a perk I've been running on her recently. Super, super good. Insta-down builds tend to work great with her. She doesn't need information as much as other killers, which means, like I said, she gets to run a lot more of these insta-downs for quicker chases or regression perks to make the game last longer. Still super strong. I think she's only been pushed down because there are other stronger killers now. Above her, this is probably a bit controversial. I'm sure a lot of people would have expected me to place him lower. But I have Vecna up here at B tier. I know a lot of people consider him very easy to counter. The magic items are a little weird. Mimics are inconsistent. But I still think that Vecna just has too much going on in a good way. Like, there's just a lot of power. You know, Fly is very useful on a lot of God palettes and God windows. Obviously, Mage Hand is just free hits in certain loops, especially since it barely slows you down to use it. And personally, I actually run the gloves and the boots, which make Mage Hand basically free. You use it, you down someone instantly. Like, there's a lot of smaller loops where having the 0.5 second extension from the gloves, the brown add-on, that, the one that extends Mage Hand's activation by half a second can sometimes make it where a survivor can loop it out twice without being able to drop it and completely guarantees the hit, with the boots only helping with that. I don't think his detection orb is super, super good. It is nice to have, especially on two-story maps where you can cover a lot of surface area with it very quickly. But the magic items do help with survivors being able to avoid it. As for the magic items, I think the easy downside to Vecna is the Eye of Vecna and the Hand of Vecna, which just very easily allow one survivor to escape you super quick. Sure, you get a noise notification where they end up, but God, is it very, very unfortunate to be mid-chase with someone not realizing they have the Hand of Vecna and then they just disappear. That's why I wouldn't place him any higher than this. This is like literally the highest I would ever place him. Any higher would just be kind of a demerit to anyone I'd place above him. Speaking of above him, I still have Pyramid Head up here. I've always placed Pyramid Head relatively high. Back in the day, I used to have him way higher, especially when he was able to cancel Punishment of the Damned in M1. Or, when he was able to cancel Rites of Judgment in M1. Just so you could, like, fake out survivors. Punishment of the Damned is still probably one of the strongest horizontal attacks we have. Those, like, long-range, straight line attacks like Xenomorph Tail, Nemesis Whip. It goes through walls. It's a solid damage state. It doesn't care about any statuses or anything. It's just super strong. A very, very good chase perk. And sure, a good survivor can try to dodge, but it just takes you reading their dodge to hit them. With that, Torment is a super cool mechanic. I like the cages. I like that it still ignores hook perks. It's super, super nice being able to cancel out a lot of the hook perks that we're worried about. We don't see them anywhere near as much as we used to, which is why I'm probably not going to place him ever any higher than B tier these days. But he's still a super strong killer. I can't get over how good Punishment of the Damned is. And obviously range extensions makes it crazy. For Hag, I didn't talk about much about add-ons. For Vecna, obviously I'm very, very leaning towards the Mage Hand add-ons. For him, for Pyramid Head, dude, just 2 extension add-ons and you're good. Like, it is so good being able to hit Punishment of the Damned from that far away. Above Pyramid Head, I'm going to have Artist. Now, personally, I don't play a ton of Artist. However, I have seen what a good artist can do. I've played against some really, really good artists, and I think even Otts somewhat recently made a video talking about Artist and how good she can be. People do misuse her crows a lot. A lot of people will just use them for information on gens, and that's kind of it. But I think the crows are one of the best chase powers. It is super, super hard to play around the crows, because if you run into one, you're automatically swarmed. And if you get hit by one, she just has easy setup. Leaving the loop is dangerous. Staying in the loop is dangerous. Plus, not to mention that she doesn't really waste a ton of time placing and using them. So even in mid-chase, she is still very dangerous as an M1 killer while setting up crows. A lot of pressure, super strong killer. Just in general, like not even worried about add-ons, I think she's just that good of a killer. Where you could place her pretty high B tier, kind of similar to Hag, doesn't need perks a ton. She can play a lot more in regression and stalling, because she's able to just guarantee downs pretty easily if you're really good with her. Right above Artist, I have Oni. Now, I've been a little inconsistent with my placement of Oni. Sometimes I think he's strong, sometimes I think he's weak. Actually, honestly, looking at it now, I'd probably place him below Artist. He's strong, one of the few insta-down killers. All he needs to do is land, like, basically a hit, just 2 hits to get his power initially, and then it's just going to be down, down, down if he knows where to find you. He's probably the killer that needs perks the most, in my opinion. I think he's very, very reliant on information, because if he doesn't get an injure, he's just really going to struggle to find people. Honestly, it's probably why I'm going to place him below Artist, because Artist is pretty good at finding people. And I even mentioned it before that occasionally finding someone with birds is very strong. Oni just doesn't have anything like that. Sure, if you're bleeding, he can find you, but you have to be bleeding already, which sure, he wants that. And a lot of Onis will run builds that are centered around you not healing, just so he can get more value out of gaining his power. And that way, when you guys do heal, he has the insta down, you know. The regular Oni shenanigans. I think he's strong. Demon Dash is a very hard ability to use, in my opinion. But if you're good with him, he is a very, very devastating killer. Strong all around. I think he's pretty well balanced, though. I think the only reason I place him above these more balanced killers is just because of his very reliable insta-downing. Going into A tier now, at the bottom, I have Spirit. Some people consider Spirit to be one of the best killers in the game, even after her nerfs. I still think she's very strong, but there is a handful of killers I place above her, obviously. I'd say for the most part, Spirit is just super reliable, very easy to use as long as you can listen really well. She's a very, very good chase killer. It's hard to really loop her at all, because the second you start looping her well, she's just going to Spirit Walk on you, or whatever it's called. I forget the name of her power. But Yamaoka's Haunting. She's just going to use that, you know, get around you, hit you as soon as she can, just listen for you vaulting and all that. Easiest way to play around her is very, very strong loops. Loops where if she's trying to use Yamaoka's Haunting to get around you, you can vault pretty safely knowing she's not going to be able to get back to you easily, or at very least that you can read it and vault back. Her counterplay is very difficult. But at the same time, she's also pretty difficult. I say she's easy to use, but she's hard to use very well. That's something I feel about a lot of the higher tier killers, is that they are very, very good purely when you're very, very good with them. So speaking of which, let's talk about Unknown. I think I'd argue Unknown is probably actually one of the best killers in the whole game. But unfortunately, those damn hallucinations are placed semi-randomly. It's a set timer, and if your power is off cooldown, you can delay it and control where you place your hallucinations. But them being random just sucks. Or at least them placing, like, on your body semi-randomly just sucks. The UVX, super strong. Weakness, super good. I like the idea that you have to look at the Unknown to remove your weakness. It's super fun. A lot of times I'll have survivors run into stuff because they're trying to remove the status, and if they don't remove it, obviously he has kill potential. For anyone who doesn't know, the way he works is he shoots his little UVX ball, which explodes. Anyone inside is weakened. If they are weakened, the ball will deal damage. He has some pretty good add-ons. My personal favorites to run are the one that reveal the aura of survivors either when they're near or when they touch one of your hallucinations. I forget the exact way it activates. And then the yellow add-on that hinders survivors who are hit by the orb in midair. The orb does bounce, which puts a very, very high skill ceiling on him. And that's something you'll just see with a lot of people who made him. He's very impressive to watch people play because you'll see a lot of trick shots, a lot of really, really good bounces on loops. He is one of the hardest killers to beat in a loop, just by far. And I think he's a very, very devastating character to play against. I think he's still relatively well balanced, though. I think that skill ceiling is still really high, and that a competent team of survivors can kick the ass of a, like, not amazing unknown. Above unknown, we have Hillbilly. Oh, actually, no, sorry. Above unknown. Where did I just place Hillbilly? Above unknown, I have twins. Actually, I'll probably move them down a little. I think twins are really strong. You just don't see enough of them. People just don't know how to play against them. I'd love to talk more about them, but I just don't play a ton of twins. I know they're strong. I've played against a few, and they are very strong. But that might just be you never see them. So how do you know how to play against them, right? Anyway, we have Hillbilly above unknown. This is purely observer. This is purely from observing Hillbillies. I suck with Hillbilly. I know he's super good. His rework with the overdrive mechanic is insane. I've seen Hillbillies pull off the craziest 180s with his turning radius. Not much to say. He's just super strong, super fast, insta-downing like crazy, very reliable in chase. He's just really good. Everything Leatherface wishes he was. Up into S tier. This is where we're getting into the killers that I think are just way too good. Like, they're just going to devastate you basically anytime you see them, as long as it's a somewhat competent killer. The only kind of exception to that is going to be Singularity. Singularity does require a little bit of map knowledge to use the cameras well, but at the end of the day, a few well-placed cameras, and he is catching up to everyone always. Super efficient at slugging, super efficient at distance coverage. He's basically a free-form teleporting killer, just because he has so much freedom with his cameras. With all of the nerfs that went to EMPs somewhat recently, he is super, super hard to counter reliably. If your team is not all on top of getting rid of his cameras, he will just keep resetting up and getting around the map, slipstreaming everyone. Personally, when I play him, I'll play one of two styles. I'll play the extra biopods with the Aura Reveal Iridescent add-on, or I will run both of the Slipstream add-ons that help spread the Slipstream. Spread it when you have the yellow and the purple add-ons that help with spreading the Slipstream and the distance at which it happens. If survivors basically ever want to look at each other ever, you're going to spread it, and it's going to be very easy to find people. The overclock mode. Holy shit. Similar to Trapper, I don't run a crazy build on my Singularity. For my Singularity, I run Fire Up, Superior Anatomy, Bamboozle, and Brutal Strength. I run no information. I run no regression. I run just make Overclock as strong as possible and deny any kind of chase ever. It's a super effective build because he's got so much coverage. Even when you EMP a camera, he has knowledge. He knows where you are, what you're doing. Something I find very fun and what a lot of my friends find impressive when I play him is you'll see me checking cameras mid-chase. And that's just crazy. That, like, Singularity's so strong, he could waste time checking cameras in the middle of a chase while not using them to teleport onto survivors. So yeah, he deserves to be up here. A somewhat competent Singularity is going to devastate. He does have counterplay, but you have to be very well coordinated for it to work. Really quickly, we'll talk about Houndmaster. I normally would have placed her in S tier, but the more I've seen her, the more I've played her, I'd probably put her down here. Probably right above Twins, underneath Unknown. I think Unknown still has more potential. And more importantly, I find Unknown way more fun to play. Houndmaster is pretty good. She's got a lot of very, very solid add-ons. The dog takes a little getting used to. I'm also not going to lie. I played her for a few days before I even realized you could redirect the dog. But the dog's pretty strong. Redirection's really good. She's very good on indoor maps, in my opinion. It's nice being able to like kick gens and pallets or even hit other survivors while the dog's holding someone. However, it's just a little clunky in my opinion. I think she still needs a little bit more patching done with like the way the dog pulls survivors and the dog's pathing when you send for searches. It's gonna just be a little buggy on certain maps, and I hope they look into it a bit more. She's still super fun to play. It's just I find Unknown way more fun to play. Alright, so going back up here to S tier above Singularity, I have Dracula. I don't think this really needs explained. If you've played against even a semi-decent Dracula, similar to Singularity, he could be basically everywhere all the time. Plus, not to mention, he has super good information in wolf form. The wolf gets the pounce. He's got the bat form, which is super fast. It can teleport, go over vaults. Then he's got his vampire form, where, you know, regular M1 killer, but he's got the hellfire pillars. He just does everything, and he does it super, super well. I actually think this is kind of what Vecna should have been. Also, looking at this, I'm going to move Vecna below Hag. This is what Vecna could have been. This is like how devastating Vecna's powers could have been if magic items didn't exist. I'd say if there were no magic items, I'd put Vecna up here, right next to Dracula. But Dracula just does it all, and he does it right. He's got tracking with the wolf, with the centaurs, even a little bit of haste with that. On top of that, the pounce is super strong. Personally, I think his pounce should not be 2 dashes. I think it should just be the 1. But even still, I don't think that would hinder him too much as a killer. The top of S tier, I actually have Trickster. This is a bit controversial. I know a lot of people that put Trickster like really low. A good Trickster, a solid Trickster who knows what he is doing and does not miss knives, will insta down everyone. You cannot chase with a Trickster, you down with a Trickster. Assuming you're not missing your knives too often. And his add-ons make it so much harder to deal with. Personally, I really love adding the, really love using the add-on that ricochets the knives. It just makes chases so much easier. You start thinking in ways you normally would never think about with maps and like how to bounce your knives. I'm not even that great of a Trickster, and I barely lose with him. He's just that good in my opinion, where if you can aim at all, he will get you a few kills guaranteed. And then there is no shocker to this. Everyone knows Nurse and Blight are still the best characters in the game. The simple reason for this is just because they break the game. They work in a way the game, in my opinion, isn't really built for. Nurse ignores everything. Granted, she is slower than survivors. She has the really bad fatigue, but a good Nurse, never missing her blinks, is just on top of you, downing you. And it's not like with Trickster or Dracula, where it's like, oh no, she's always on top of you. Nurse, quite literally, is always right there hitting you. Just directly on top of you, landing hits, because that's what her power is. It's teleporting where she wants, when she wants. Her add-ons have been fixed a lot. I know she had the big rework that made her iridescence a lot not as good. I don't think Nurse is as good as people talk about anymore, just because a lot of people don't play her anymore. You barely see her, and when you do, it's usually a new player these days. And when you are in the super high ranks, if you see a Nurse, you can kind of just kiss your ass goodbye. You already lost. So that's why I have her up here. Because of her lack of play, I put her below Blight. First of all, I find Blight far more fun to play, but Blight also intuitively breaks the game. Chases are very hard with him because on long enough loops, he can just get around them faster than you can, making it impossible to loop him. And even if you are in a strong palette, he can just break it. Thank God this guy can't vault windows very fast, because first of all, that would be awesome, but second of all, he'd be probably the best killer in the game forever if that were the case. He is balanced a little. The first lethal rush can't damage, but that is not going to stop a Blight in the slightest, just like with a Ghoul. You're like, it's just there to stop him from downing you quicker. I think it's very good the way Blight works right now. I think despite being a super strong killer, his presence is very necessary. They somewhat recently changed his add-ons. They nerfed his iridescent add-ons, which was unfortunate but very well deserved. One of his add-ons just made no sense. He could break pallets instantly with dash, and it hindered survivors. Like, it was way too much. I think now the new rush limiting add-ons that affect the actual stats of his power are far more appropriate. Especially with the changes to stuff like Alchemist Ring. Alchemist Ring was both kind of pointless and it also encouraged very toxic gameplay. I believe the original Alchemist Ring, I might have the wrong add-on, but this did used to exist where if the last hit of your rush downed or hit a survivor, it reset your cooldown. Basically, if you were able to time your rushes well enough, you could just use your power non-stop to down survivors, and it also encouraged slugging sometimes, which just isn't that healthy. But the new ones, I think the new Alchemist Ring is every consecutive charge lasts 20% longer, which can lead to very good cross maps, which requires a lot more skill. It is an add-on that affects people who are good with the killer in a different way. It doesn't encourage slugging rapidly. It actually encourages spreading out a lot more, getting across the map and getting some pretty cool downs. I like the way they're going with Blight. I hope we do see maybe another add-on pass, kind of fixing him up a little more, maybe making some of his add-ons a little stronger. Actually, I think most killers need all of their add-ons looked at. I think the weak add-ons should be buffed, and some of the iridescent add-ons should be nerfed. Just because there are a lot of pointless add-ons in the game. There's one Houndmaster has. I'll talk about this real quick. She has an add-on. I think it is yellow. Whenever a survivor is grabbed by the dog, she has 2% faster basic attack cooldown against them, or maybe in general while the dog is holding someone, which is probably the actual worst add-on that actually does something. Like, confetti bottles with clown mean more than that add-on, and that's like, wow, why does this add-on exist? Regardless, though, this is the current standing of my tier list. I like where it is so far. Obviously, we have a new killer, which I've been able to place here, and I'll probably make an updated video where I talk about his new placement later on. But this is where I place everyone for now, and you'll probably see this tier list again in an upcoming video. So thank you for anyone who watched. Sorry for the like hour-long video, but here soon I plan on reviewing all like 7,000 perks. See ya!